Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In this video, we are going to talk about a topic that comes up a lot when you talk about Tailwind CSS. And that is that you have so long class names because all of your styles are basically defined in your HTML. It is true, and if you don't take care of your class name definitions, then you might end up with a mess that's really hard to maintain. So today I want to show you a few things that you can do to make life a bit easier. First of all, let's start with the setup we have here. It's basically that simple component here. It's a button that when you click on it, just counts up, but then when you focus on it, it has its focus, its hover state, and at the same time it also has a different hover state when you are not focused on it. Simple, but as you can already imagine, this is going to be a lot of classes. And some projects even have longer classes, but for now let's have a look at this. So I've got this empty Weed project. I've got this button here, and as you can see, it's a really long list. And one of the common advice that I give people is when you can extract components. That means this is straightforward, like here and here, that's like two different class names. But imagine we had 20 of these buttons. And imagine then we also have a layout for this, and then now you can see this is like getting massive. And if you know that these are going to be the same all the time, yeah, you can use your cursor to edit this. Like, let's make this medium. It's just fine, but long term, if you have, for example, changed this to, I don't know, tight, this is going to become a nightmare to like now have a look at, because how do you now make sure that you actually also cover this text right here if this is suddenly different? So in these cases, just extract it to a button. So what you would do here is, let me get rid of all of this for now. What you would do is you would extract this to a component. Let's say it's called components, and then we have something called button tsx export const button, which is basically just rendering this button here. And it will also just contain the state if you want to. It really depends on how you structure your code. In this case, we just worry about our CSS. So let's do this and replace this one here with a button. So as you can see, now we only had to define this once, and we can now, without having to duplicate class names, we can just go ahead and like have 20 of these buttons, and they work independently as they are meant to be. Okay, which is one step further, but if we look at this, we still have this massive list. How do we make sure that we like don't mess up things here? So one thing, for example, like what if I'm here and want to make this text larger? You already see my, like I've got a CSS conflict here because I've got the text small and text large defined. This is coming from if you go to Tailwind CSS, they will talk about this in IntelliSense for VS Code. And basically I've installed this extension which does a lot, like linting. It also helps with autocomplete, and the previews that you can see, like this one, it shows basically what color I'm going to expect here. So that's like one thing that's already going to help. But another thing that you will notice is like I've got so many different things here. Like I know here's the flexbox stuff, but what if I want to add, and here's the padding stuff. Where would I place something to make this a lot more readable? And I think another thing that Tailwind offers straight out of the box is this Prettier plugin. And this Prettier plugin is basically going to sort all the CSS classes based on their recommendation how it should be. So if we do this here, what they want us to do in our terminal, let's run yarn add Prettier and the plugin. If we then create our Prettier RC, so in here a Prettier RC file, and paste this in, what we will get is straight out of the box. If we now save this, you see it basically reordered our items. So for example, if I now went ahead and made a change here, let's say I'm also having to have a margin Y of 20. As soon as I press save here, this margin 20 will move to its right position. And the good thing is it's going to be always the same order regardless of what you do. So if I, for example, had a span in here that says, which is the count, okay, let's say for this we want to have class name font mono, and we also want to have it inline block and mx2, for example. If we now save this, this will reorder it similar to what we have here. So the margin bit will come to the first, then probably similar to the flex here, the inline block, and then font related stuff will probably come somewhere at the end. Let's have a try. And exactly like how I expected it to be. The good thing is, the more you use Tailwind CSS with these tools, the more you get accustomed to where the class names will be. So scanning for the right thing here will be a lot easier in the long term. Another thing that I want to show you is basically using a tool called CVA. I've talked about it in a previous video already, so please have a look if you want to get an introduction. But basically what CVA does is it helps you create components and compose components for the same element. So basically you can, for example, have different variants and different properties and provide different class names based on these properties. But you can also use CVA to organize your class names basically. And I want to show you what I mean by that. So let me import, I think I've installed CVA already, yeah. So let me import CVA from CVA. And what I will do is I will say const button equals CVA, and then we can say base, and then copy over all these and then over here we will basically call button, and we have our class names here. This becomes easy if you want to separate your class definitions or your class names that you want to apply from the actual markup structure. So as you see, like this component itself is basically just what maximum of 77 like columns, but there's another benefit to it. So base is basically the base name of the base definition of this button, but this doesn't have to be a single string. What you can do is it can also be an array of class names, and what CVI will do is it will just concat all these values. How can we use this? As you can already see, if I save this, it already breaks this into the new lines to make sure that we have shorter lengths. But what you can now do is you can break these things up even further. So for example, what I can do here is I can take all my focus hover styles and put them in a separate item, and what will happen is lands automatically on the second line. I will do the same thing for the focus only styles, like this, put them in a separate line, and same with the hover styles. So we go all the way here, put this somewhere here, and this looks a lot more readable than before. But we can go crazy with this. Like we can, for example, say I want to have all gradient related stuff in a separate part here as well. And maybe also like every layout related things here. And suddenly all of this is a lot more readable, and the output in the end in button here will still be the same. If you have a look, it's still the same button and it still works the same. So I think, whereas the plain simple way of using Tailwind CSS is going to end up with long class names, especially if you have more complex elements, there are ways to make sure that having these long lists doesn't get too complicated and unmaintainable. And as you can see with this one here, you can also make sure that this stays readable and it doesn't blow your mind whenever you open up your components. I hope this video helped you, and if you have any questions, please let me know. If you have any other concerns, please let me know about Tailwind CSS, and I'm happy to address them in another video. Thank you, and see you next time.